Hello friends, I'm Brian, and this is Gizmo Board Games. Today I am doing a review of Earth, a game by Maxim Tardif and presented by Inside Up Games. Recently there was an Abundance expansion that has arrived. I'm not talking about that expansion. I don't have it, I've never played it, don't know anything about it. Well, I know bare minimum about it. Nothing to do with this expansion in this review, just the standard Earth game that I believe was Kickstarter a few years back, and I got my hands on it a couple years ago and have played a few times, and now bringing you this review. Anyway, if you're familiar with some of my reviews, I am changing things up just slightly, tweaking with how I'm going to do this review, and it's all revolved around my Gizmo scale. I've kind of changed the wording of that scale just a tweak. So some differences there, but otherwise my review is going to be the same as every other review, and that is to start off like I'm about to do right now with a little bit of an overview of how the game is played. In Earth, you are building a tableau that represents Earth. Mostly the land features and the flora and fauna of Earth. On a player's turn, that player is going to choose one of 4 actions to take. And that action can be to build into your tableau by paying the cost of a card in your hand, placing it in your tableau, building the tableau. The second action a player can take is to get more Earth. And Earth is kind of the currency of the game. The soil of the Earth, that is the currency. And that's what you're going to use to play those cards out of your hand into your tableau. So that's also a very strong action. The third thing you can do is start building up on your cards, on your Earth, using canopies. You're building those trees basically, one trunk at a time until you get the topper and you score extra points for completing a canopy as dictated on the card itself. In addition to that, you're also going to be able to, at times, get sprouts onto certain cards. And those are like all the seedlings that the bees are going to use to carry around and make more trees and stuff. That's also represented in this game. And another thing you're going to do for points is to build into your refuse pile. That's kind of like a discard pile because you're taking cards out of your hand or maybe even off the deck and putting them in this pile. And that's just building up some refuse of extra soil and dirt and whatever. That's kind of what that represents. And in the end, all these things are going to be worth points. The cards you play onto the board, the number of sprouts you have, the number of canopies you have, and completed ones are going to give you bonus points. And of course, everything in your kind of refuse stack is going to give you a point as well. And finally, there's going to be some different goals, whether individual goals from cards you've played, individual goals you start with in your little starting tableau board, your player board, and some shared things in the center board as well that you're kind of racing to get. Everything's going to be worth points. And the final action that I didn't mention is, of course, you're going to take an action to get more cards into your hand. And I'm kind of glossing over this. Some of these have like double actions on them. But the main key actions you're going to be doing is getting cards in your hand, playing them to your tableau, and then building things upon them and collecting the resource, the money of the game to do those actions. So that's mainly what this is a tableau game. However, the neat thing about this game is it's a choose-follow type game. So the player whose turn it is will pick the main action. And they'll do that action as the player picker at the higher capability. But everybody else around the table will be able to do the follow action, the lesser version of that same action. So if I pick the build my tableau action, I can actually build 2 cards at once. And everybody else can build 1 card into their tableau. Or if I take the get more soil action, I'm going to take more soil, but everybody else can get a little bit of soil or cards, etc., etc. And then the final thing everybody's going to do on their turn is activate all the cards they have in their tableau of the color of the action that was just taken. So if I took a green action, I would do my green action ability, and then I would look on my tableau going from top to bottom, left to right, like American style reading, activating any green actions on the cards I have in play. Thus, you're building an engine of a tableau, and you've got to keep in mind how they're going to react off of each other. Because, again, you're going to play the engine in left to right, top to bottom order. So something you might get from one part of a red action could activate in a later red action in your tableau. But also placement of certain cards add points from other cards or from the goal cards. Might have, you need different icons in this row or similar icons touching each other or whatever it is. So there's a lot to pay attention to as you're building your tableau and taking your actions. And after somebody completes their full 4x4 tableau, that is 16 cards onto the board, the game will then end at the end of that round, and you'll go into scoring. And I know that was a brief overview. There's lots of different ways to get points, as I've mentioned, different goals that you're going after in the middle. But I don't want to get too into the weeds with how the game is played. Just wanted to give a brief overview that this is a tableau builder engine game where you're all taking simultaneous actions to trigger the end game at 16 cards, and then you're racing towards end game or towards goal cards and in-game bonus points based on your own cards on your own individual player board and the central board of cards that were randomly distributed at the beginning of the game. And that's the rough overview of Earth. Let's go ahead and get into my gizmo thoughts, starting with my new G. What do I think is good about the game? The things I like about Earth. Well, first of all, as you can see, hopefully from some of the inserts I've set up and just looking at the game, it is a beautiful game. The art is wonderful, real-life art of Earth. Just absolutely gorgeous shots, pictures, images that you're building out in your tableau. And the nice wooden components that are the spores and the canopies and things you're building. They didn't need to make all the canopy head covers different colors. They could all have been green or whatever. But that adds that little touch. The colors don't mean anything other than making your little spread look better. So this really is a beautiful looking game. The components of it are wonderful. And this used to be my old eye. So I'm talking about it now as something that is good, because my eye is going to change to things to improve if you're an old-time follower. But anyway, continuing on with the things that are good. And components, the wood bits, the cards, the art, absolutely amazing. The next good item for Earth is the engagement. This is a lead and follow action. So everybody on everybody's turn is going to take actions. Simultaneous actions even. So it's going to go quicker than a lot of other games. So the speed of play of this game is pretty good because everybody's engaged on everybody's turn taking actions, whether you're the leader and taking the bigger action or the follower and taking the smaller actions, and then everybody's triggering again their engines based on the action color. So a lot of interaction, well, not necessarily interaction, you're not really interacting a whole lot other than racing for the points, but engagement. You're always engaged on everybody's turn because you're always going to be taking an action and triggering, hopefully, an engine, especially in the later parts of the game when you've got more cards in play. So it's a very engaging game. There's always something for you to do and pay attention to. Like a lot of these similar games, there's a bunch of variety. There's hundreds of cards that you're using. There's variable setup for the common goals and in-game scoring. Those are dual-sided cards, so you can shuffle them and flip them, and you're only placing 2 or 4 or 6 or whatever out, depending on the game and player counts. And the double-sided as far as the goal cards go. So there's just going to be plenty of variability in setup and variety of cards you're going to see. You're never going to see even probably half the cards in any given play. So multitude of variety and variability in the setup and the cards you see. The gameplay is going to be the same every game, but the goals and the cards you see in the tableau you build is going to be very, very different. A lot of variability. So I do like that in games like this, Arc Nova, Wingspan, all the same as far as that goes. Ease of play, I think, is pretty good for the most part. Ease of play for the most part, because again, you've got 4 actions. You're going to take them either at the higher or lower ability, so there's only 4 things to really learn. And then following through your engine could add a little bit of less ease of play, but it's nothing too strenuous to stress about. And even if you don't set up your engine in the best way to trigger things the way you might have wanted to, or maybe misjudge certain ways that the goals could have been played for better. That's kind of in the strategy, but the game itself is pretty easy to play and figure out pretty quickly what you're doing. And my final thing I like, the good thing about Earth is, for me, points galore. I'm a big Stefan Feld fan, and he's known for his games being point salad. This is no different. I like games where you feel like everything you do at least gives you something. Whether it's building towards something later, or just immediately, well, I've got not much to do, but at least I can, trash these 2 cards, and now they're in my refuse stack, and they're worth 2 points. Or maybe I'll just get 3 sprouts, and that's 3 more points at the end of the game. Everything you do is going to get you points in this game for the most part. So I just like that. You feel like you're getting something out of every action you do. So that's what I thought was good, or is good, about Earth. Let's look at what I think can improve. So looking at the improvements for me, the first thing I noticed in one of my multiplayer games is we had a couple of goal cards that were very, very similar. They were both canopy related, and we couldn't quite figure out what exactly the 2 goals were and how they were different from each other. And there's no appendix in the game where you can look up a card and have it spelled out how exactly that card is played. There's a little overlay sheet that shows you like kind of the icons, but there was nothing explaining those 2 goals and how they were different. And I'm going to talk about Stefan Feld again, but a lot of his city games literally have an appendix of every card in the game. You just look up the card number, and there's a little blurb about exactly what that card does. And Earth is just missing that. And I most of it should be self-explanatory, But in this one instance, we had 2 very similar goals, but they were different enough that we knew they weren't the same goal, obviously. And we just kind of have to guess what each one was individually. And I felt it could have been fixed with a little appendix of at least all the goal cards. Another improve, and this one for me is okay. I like these kind of games, but some people don't. It really is multiplayer solitaire. You're not really interacting with each other a whole lot. You're just kind of waiting to see what action they take, and then you do your lesser action of that, and you activate your tableau, and then you do it again and again and again and again. And there's not much interaction other than racing for those individual little first to do it goal cards. Get you a little bit more points, but you're going to get points if you meet that goal in the game. You're going to get some amount of points for having done it anyway. Just kind of racing to get the most out of it that you can. A lot of multiplayer solitaire, despite the fact that it is a lead and follow game. So I don't know, I thought that was kind of weird. Maybe if there was a display of cards and like player order mattered for who gets which card when you do the take card, that would really slow the game down. But it at least adds some interaction as you try to steal cards from each other. But I don't mind multiplayer solitaire. A lot of the games I enjoy are multiplayer solitaire, but for those of you who don't, enjoy it. Another thing I noticed, it seems like there can be a good imbalance in the game. It seems engine dependent. Because one of the games I played, the player to my right had a really good green engine. And if you know Earth, the green engine is the build your tableau engine. And whenever you take the green action, you can plant 2 cards versus 1. And again, you're racing to be the first one to make a tableau of 16. And just because you're the one who finishes the tableau doesn't mean you win. But it sure does help if you can take the green action every single time, build 2 cards out. You can make the game a 9-round game. And that's exactly what happened in this very game. He had, basically, you can play cards for free to the tableau because he had 2 discounts. And then he had green actions that allowed him to get soil. So he never had to take any other action. Every time it was his turn, you knew he was going to play the green action. Which is fine, I guess, but as the next player in turn order, me, if I'm taking my 1 green plant action when he takes his, I'm spinning my soil. And I didn't have the green engine because he had the whole of the green engine, so I wasn't getting anything else. So I could wait and take the green action on my turn so I could hopefully plant 2 cards. But I was still behind the curve. It just felt bad, I guess is what I'm saying, in that game. And I could see that happening with other engines, and maybe that's a me fault, but it really does seem engine dependent, where if one card or one player is getting all the cards that feed into each other, and me over here, I didn't have a single green card that whole game. Not one. And one of the goals, the common goals, was 4 green cards or something like that. So not only was he getting that green engine that kept building his tableau, and he ended the game in 9 turns. He had his whole 16, or 8 turns, I guess, 8 or 9, somewhere in there. He had his whole 16 card tableau, and the rest of us had 8 card tableaus. It felt really bad at the end of the game, because we couldn't do anything about it. And so I know that's probably a rare instance with this many cards, but it does seem like a little bit of a broken system when it can do that. So I'm not sure about how balanced some of the engines are, because I know green cards are more rare to get in the deck than like the yellow or red cards too. So does the expansion fix that? I don't know. But hopefully, because that felt really bad, and that drives some of my negative feelings for this game. Another thing that drives some of my negative feelings for this game is the solo mode. I feel is pretty bad too. It's a 6-card deck, and on their turn, you're just going to take the top card of the deck, and generally they're going to take an action, which gets them cards or things that they just put on a board, and eventually they're worth points, the more they get of them. And then you've got a follow action underneath. And then vice versa, there's the solo player board, where you're going to take your action like normal and do that like normal, and then there's an anima follow-on based on how many things they have. They're going to do similar things as well. And it functions fine, but the one thing in there is there are 2 cards that give them those common goals. So the first turn of the game, you can flip over, they get a common goal card, boom, right off the bat, they get the most points for that common goal. Nothing you could have done about it, even if you were most of the way to that goal. And I find that super frustrating, that there's no way to plan around it. I can't see them building towards a goal that maybe, like, I'll save that goal for later. Let me chase the other goal. There's a little bit of mitigation because the 2 cards are like basically take one of the 2 left goals and one of the 2 right goals. So you can kind of decide which ones they get the first time around. But once they play through those 6 cards, you're going to shuffle them back in, and they're going to play through them again. So there's only so much mitigation you can do. And top that with the fact that they're always going to score all 4 of those goals unless you can end the game before that happens. And the most I've ever seen is I've gotten 3 of 4 goals in a couple of games. So it felt not fun always. And maybe this game wasn't meant for solo play. You know, it's a lead and follow game. So that obviously is made for multiplayer more. But if you're going to throw a solo mode in and take the time to make it work, it should be a little more engaging. I don't know. It just flip a card, do a thing, whatever. Let me take my turns. And the game ends when they run out of deck. So at most, you're going to get 12 rounds. And that goes back into the green engine. Like if I have a good engine, then I can keep up and finish the game, you know, in or ahead of 12 rounds. And hopefully pick up some of those goals along the way. But if I've got a bad engine and like I'm playing catch up the whole time, the game's just going to end after 12 rounds. And no matter what I've done or tried to set myself up to do. So if you're a solo player, I don't know. I didn't care for this solo game that much either. Another improve for me is the game is quite fiddly. And by that, I mean there's just a lot of pieces that can, knock over a canopy. Like I'm trying to put a piece on and blop, they fall over. Or I'm trying to get sprouts on the cards and then sprouts, like somebody bumps the table and they slide everywhere. Anytime you're trying to shuffle 2 decks, like Arc Nova is my favorite game. But anytime you're trying to shuffle a big deck of cards, it's just hard. It's not easy to shuffle 200 cards. So it's a lot of fiddliness of it. And then my final improve is because it's that multiplayer solitaire where everybody's going to take their own actions and then work on their own engine and tableau. You got to be really cautious with who you're playing with. And I don't mean that like necessarily people are cheating or everything, but maybe people don't understand what they're doing. And if you're busy on focusing on your engine, and following your flow of action, you don't know that he's not realizing he shouldn't have taken 2 cards, or maybe he underplayed himself or herself. You just don't know. And then they lose by 20 points, but they could have been a lot closer if they knew, like, actually, you could have been doing that every time. So that bit of multiplayer solitaire and co-action can really hamper, depending on your group and how familiar with things they are, or how honest they are at times. I hate to say it, but it could be true in some groups. You can't police everybody without really slowing the game down and doing the engine one at a time or something like that. And that's not what the game was meant to be. It was meant to be a quick, play together, simultaneous action game. So those are my improves. All right, Z, is it easy to play? This gets back at my last little note a little bit, in that, yes, it's pretty easy to play. Again, there's 4 actions. It's lead, follow. You can kind of help each other out through the first few rounds till everybody gets a feel of what they're doing. Yes, there are some goals and in-game points and tableau cards that you might have to think a little bit more or less about. But in the end, it's basically a 4 action, and they're all pretty simple actions. Easy to play. But there's plenty of complexity in decision making as well. So I feel like as far as is it easy, yes, it's pretty easy, and even the complexity isn't that complex. More of it. What's the replayability like? Again, I mentioned the dual-sided cards, the hundreds and hundreds of cards to shuffle, and with the expansion, probably even more cards and actions and variables and everything else in play. Even the actions themselves and how you're triggering and set up your engine. You could have the same cards and set them up different and triggering a different engine every time. So lots and lots and lots of variety. You could play this game probably hundreds of times and not come across the same game twice. So huge marks for variability, replayability, whatever. Unless you just don't like the 4 actions, I guess, then maybe you might not want to replay it as much. But it's all built in quite nicely. And finally, originality. Is it original? No, it's not. Nothing about this game, I don't think, is original. Unfortunately, there's tableau builders, there's lead-follow games, it looks pretty. It's Earth, it looks pretty. You're building up little canopies and stuff, and but nothing about this game feels to me very original, and let me tell you why. Starting with engagement, shared actions, lead, follow, space base comes to mind for doing that kind of thing, or bad company, where you're engaged in every turn because somebody's rolling some dice and everybody's doing something on the board based on that dice roll. I like those games better. Tableau builder theme game. I'm going to go right into Ark Nova. I'm building a tableau with a great zoo animal theme. I just like that better. I think there's more going on in that game that I enjoy. And it's not a race to first one to play 16 cards in the game. Now, you need your tableau to earn you the points. You need to focus on various aspects of getting those conservation points. People underlook that. And so your tableau, I think, matters more in Ark Nova, where Earth, it's just, sure, get 16 cards out and hope you scored a bunch along the way and maybe wrap it up and do it again. It's a whole lot quicker, I'll give it that, than Ark Nova. But Ark Nova's a game I would rather play ahead of Earth. So I've mentioned 3 games now that I would rather play instead of this one. The tableau with an engine. Wingspan, another one of my favorite games, does basically the same thing. You're playing animal cards onto a tableau, and you're activating them each time you do a thing that involves them. And you need to manage your engine, and you're racing towards various goals to score the most points at the end of the game. And another one of my favorite tableau engine builders is Race for the Galaxy, where, again, you're racing to build the tableau, and you're using the cards in hand as points. So you're managing the cards you have a lot more, and you're managing your action selection and you're trying to figure out, because it's simultaneous action selection, you're only play the actions that anybody chooses in that round. So if everybody chooses the same action that round, you're only going to do that one action instead of, 3 of the 5 actions. Just, I feel like it's a lot more engaging of a tableau builder. Not only is it a more engaging tableau builder, it's probably a quicker tableau builder. And it's easier, not as fiddly. You don't have all these little bits. You've got a deck of cards and some points. And then you're playing them. A little bit of a learning curve with that one, but I don't think it's a tough learning curve. A lot of people make it out to be harder than it is, really. But Racer of the Galaxy and Wingspan does similar things to Earth better. And then finally, I mentioned this a couple times along the way, but if I want to play a game with points galore, I've got a whole bunch of stuff on Feld Games to pull off the shelf and play a game that just gives me points for doing things that I like better than Earth. That's not to say Earth isn't a good game. It is a good game. A lot of people call it a great game. I'm going to go into my final thoughts here and say I call this an average game. Earth is average. I've listed 6 or 7 games that do similar things that I like better. Therefore, Earth doesn't really have a place on my table. And that's the problem, because I do like Earth to an extent, but not enough to want to play it. And that's a problem in my collection because I've got almost 300 games. So Earth gets a 3 out of 5 rating from me. It's a good game, just not as good as a lot of people make it out to be. In my opinion, I just listed 6 or 7 games I think that do the various things of Earth better. And maybe that's my fault for not saying, yeah, but do all those 6 games do everything together? Yeah, maybe not, but I find Earth not worth my trouble when I look at my shelf. I almost never want to pull Earth off of it. And that's where I am with Earth. Again, 3 out of 5 gizmos, 6 something on Board Game Geek. It's a fine game. I would play it for sure, but it's not one I'm wanting to play. And on my shelf, that's a negative, unfortunately for it. But I've got so many games, so little time that Earth just doesn't make the cut. But I am happy to play it. I'd be happy to play it anytime with anyone who likes the game and knows the game for sure. I'm not sure I want to teach it myself. So that's where I am at Earth. It's fine. It's a good game. It's a good 3 out of 5 gizmos. It does all those things I've mentioned along the way. So if you think it's the game for you, definitely pick it up. It is worth it if you don't find it not worth it, which is where I sit on the game, unfortunately. And that's my review of Earth. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. Comment below your thoughts on Earth and why I am wrong in my opinion. Of course, and subscribe below if you haven't, so that way you can get more reviews, videos about board gaming, other content from me. I look forward to seeing you on the next video. I'll catch you next time. Bye.